I used to pray for times like this. I used to genuinely pray for times like this. I can't even hide my excitement, man. The fact that it's taken this long is actually criminal because I've been listening to hip hop for the good part of, I want to say, 18 years now, consciously at least, because I'm pretty sure even before I was 10 years old, I was exposed to it, but I wasn't really conscious to it. But my first real exposure to hip hop was around about the time Lil Wayne dropped the Carter 3. Even as a 10-year-old, you could not avoid the massive impact that the Carter 3 had. 18 years later, I have my criticisms of Carter 3. People have seen me criticize that album, but that was my first real exposure to hip hop. Lil Wayne was my first GOAT, and I thought that was like the greatest thing that I've ever heard at that time. But obviously since then, I've been exposed to a lot more hip hop. I've been exposed to a lot more rappers. I still hold Lil Wayne in high regards, but yeah. But in these 18 years of listening to the genre, I've never personally owned physical media. My father, when Eminem dropped Recovery, which is when I actually became an Eminem stan, and I've not looked back since, 16 years since, I've not looked back. I still think Eminem is the greatest of all time, and that album was the one that really made me a super fan of Eminem. Before that, I was exposed to some Relapse, I was exposed to some of Marshall Mathers LP, obviously those songs that you couldn't avoid, the Stands of This World, even the Eminem shows, With Your Business, Till I Collapse. I've heard those songs before, but it was around about the time when Recovery dropped and we actually got the CD. Unfortunately, we don't have that CD anymore, but that was my first physical media, but it wasn't mine, it was my father's. But now at 27 years old, going on 28 years old this year, I finally own my first vinyl. Man, I'm cheesing. I am cheesing. And going into the decision of getting my first vinyl, I went to, one of my main goals for this year, amongst other goals, was to just get a vinyl. It was to get a vinyl. One of my main goals this year was to get a vinyl. I needed to make that happen, and God has blessed me with the opportunity, with the resources, and with the ability to get my own vinyl. And going into which vinyl that I got, I did put a lot of thought into it. I did put a whole list as to what vinyl I would love to get as my first vinyl. I did check prices though of vinyls that I would have loved, and then I just made a list of albums that would make sense for me to get as my first one, because I want my first one to be meaningful, right? I don't want to just get a random vinyl and say, oh yeah guys, here's my first vinyl, yay. But I really wanted my first one to be to be very meaningful, to be impactful, and then when I look back at my collection, I'm like, that was my first one. And after much deliberation, I went to the store earlier today. I got it today actually. I went to the store, Mr. Vinyl. Shout out Mr. Vinyl, some free promo there. But man, obviously I did go into there with the idea of what I'm gonna get, but there were three choices. My first choice, it was a bit too expensive. It was way out of my budget. Well, not a bit too expensive, but it was pretty much double the price of what I eventually got, and I didn't want to starve for the rest of the month. My second choice was just around about the same price as this, but then I was like, okay, am I gonna get this one or this one? But you guys, I will show you exactly what vinyl that I got. But I don't know, man. I just don't know how to start this shit. That's a bit of a clue as to what I got. But I got Illmatic by Nas as my first vinyl. Oh man, look at this. The greatest rap album of all time. What better way to start your vinyl collection, my hip-hop vinyl collection, with the greatest rap album of all time, man. What can I say about Illmatic that has not been said already? This is what hip-hop represents. When someone says hip-hop to me, when someone says classic album to me, when someone says a masterpiece to me, this is the first name, this is the first album that comes to mind for me. It's this, it's Good Kid, Mad City, it's the Eminem Show. These are the albums that I put in the plethora of, I don't even have the word for it, but yeah, this is the album for me. This is the hip-hop album for me, and I just thought it would be one of the most fitting to get as my first vinyl. What is my first choice, you guys ask? Well, actually, my first choice really was actually Recovery. Now that I've mentioned it, it was Recovery, and the store did have Recovery, and that was actually my second choice, Recovery, which is quite weird because that's my favorite album from my favorite rapper, which it is one of my favorite rap albums in general. My other favorite rap album, which it wasn't there, and I'm not sure if like, is it on vinyl? Dark Twisted Fantasy? I would have to check, but I didn't see any. But that was one of my first choices. But my first choice today would have been 2014 Forest Hill Drive, because I will be seeing J. Cole later in the year, and that would have been the most fitting first choice. I won't lie. But 2014 Forest Hill Drive was like double the price of Illmatic, and I was like, start for the rest of the month, get the vinyl that I actually want as my first one, or just delay it a bit and then get it. I'll either get it month end but I'll get it at some point, definitely before the end of this year. But Illmatic is like, it's not like I've settled. This is one of the greatest rap albums. Well, this is the greatest rap album of all time, in my opinion. This is the album for me, man. Like, yeah, my first vinyl. Obviously, I don't have a player yet. That's something that I'm gonna budget for later. And I think before I even get a player, I'm gonna have a collection. I'm definitely gonna collect at least, I don't know how many before I decide to buy a player, but I will budget for the player. Obviously, God willing, obviously we get the resources to get the player very soon, but that'll come very soon. But I think I'm gonna collect vinyls, just add to my collection before even thinking of getting a player, because I saw the prices of the players. Yeah, I need to work harder. I need to work harder. But yeah, we have the vinyl here. We have the track list, obviously the Genesis, bit of a skit there, and then we go into one of the greatest rap songs of all time, in New York State of Mind, in him starting off the song with one of the biggest lies in hip-hop history, by him saying, I don't know how to start this shit, and then he ends up dropping not only the greatest rap album of all time, but that is arguably the greatest song hip-hop has ever produced. Then you go to a song like Life's a Bitch that has one of the greatest feature verses of all time from AZ. Then you go to songs like The World Is Yours, anthems within hip-hop. Then you go to songs like Represent, which, this may be a hot take. This maybe, I don't even know. Actually, you could say any song in here is the best song on here. But my hot take is that, as much as I think New York State of Mind is the song of this album, but Represent, guys, is right there. Represent. Oh, that song right there. And that's actually my favorite song from this album. That's my favorite song. That's the song that I've played the most, in my opinion. Then you go to songs like One Love, One Time for Your Mind, Memory Lane, Halftime. Oh my goodness. You know, I saw a tweet recently and they asked, is Illmatic the Thriller of hip hop? And that, like, it led me to think, because for me, when I think Thriller, I think magnum opus. I think, obviously magnum opus, but I think the very top of the genre, the very top, and that's probably the greatest rap. That's probably the greatest album in general, or one of, if not the greatest album in general. So obviously, if we're using that metric, then yes. But I think Thriller, the Thriller of hip hop for me, and this is gonna sound like the ultimate glaze because I continuously glaze that album, but for me, the more fitting album for Thriller would be Dark Fantasy for me. In a way, I think, I can't even explain it properly, because when I saw that tweet, I was like, what would be the Thriller? Technically, if we're talking what's the greatest hip-hop album of all time, it's right here. But then what would be the Thriller in terms of, like, because Thriller, right, if you think about Thriller, yes, Thriller and Illmatic have the similarities in that very short track list, concise in both of them, with Illmatic with 10, but it's technically 9, and then Thriller with 9 as well. But when I think Thriller, I think movie. I think, which you can say that about Illmatic, it's like a movie, because he's talking about his life, you know, in Queensbridge, and it's a movie in itself, street life and all that. But when I think Thriller, I think like cinematic and this triumphant event, which Dark Fantasy is literally that. For me, that would be the more accurate comparison, and just the emphasis in production and the emphasis in just making a spectacular album. I don't think Illmatic is, Illmatic is spectacular, right? But I don't think it's like a try to be spectacular. I think Nas just got on here, talked about his street life, talked about his life, talked about what he was exposed to around that time, which I think it's still crazy that Illmatic, that Nas was writing this album, actively writing this album as a teenager. I think that's crazy. I think that is so crazy. Guys, do we think that Illmatic is the, how do I put this? Do we think it's the album, in terms of hip-hop at least, I won't speak for other genres, but do we think in terms of how young he was and what the album represents in terms of how much of a masterpiece it is? I don't think anyone has been this great this young. I don't think anyone has been this great ever. So yeah, I think that answers that. But it's so crazy because he dropped this. I'm gonna have to fact check this after this, but I didn't fact check it before. But I believe he dropped this at 21, and he started writing this years before that. So he dropped Illmatic, the greatest rap album of all time, at 21 years old. Where was I at 21? Where was I at 21? But yeah, man, my first vinyl is here. The greatest rap album of all time. I'm cheesing, guys. I've been smiling from ear to ear since yesterday, and yeah, man. But yeah, like, share, and subscribe, and we're definitely gonna add to the collection. And I'm thinking of actually making this a series where every time I do buy a vinyl, I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna review the album. Oh, and my other choice, by the way. So it was 2014 Forest Hill Drive. It was Illmatic, and then it was The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. That was my third choice. Well, I was bouncing around between this and Miseducation because those two are very similar in price, which I'm actually shocked as to why they're so cheap. I guess it's the whole demand and supply type of thing. I don't think it's like necessarily the quality of the album. I think it's more so demand and supply. So which means the supply is very high on these albums. Because as much as I love 2014 Forest Hill Drive, and it's a classic, it's a guaranteed classic in its own right, but it does not sit at the table of the Illmatics and the Miseducations of this world, which both are for me top 10 rap albums of all time. You could argue that, oh, Miseducation is not even a rap album. Hey, I am so shameless when I talk about Miseducation, by the way, because if I'm making a hip hop list, it's in my top 10. If I'm going to make an R&B list, which I don't think I'm very qualified to make an R&B list anyway, but if I were to make one in the future, it's going to feature there. If I were to make a neo soul list, it's going to feature there. That album is that go-to. It's multi-genre. It transcends genres. So that was my other choice. And if you know, and if you've seen from my bio, I was born on the same day as the Miseducation was released. So that would have been so fitting as well to be my first. But those three, expect them all to be in my collection within the next, I want to say the next 3 months. We'll see. God willing, I get the resources to get all three of them and many, many, many more, because I know I've just opened up a can of worms with this album right here, because now I'm just going to be buying vinyls impulsively. This is long overdue. Obviously, I've been wanting to buy vinyls. I've been wanting to get physical media, but just haven't had the resources to do so. I've prioritized other things, and rightfully so. But, God has blessed me with the resources now to be able to make those decisions. So now I have the resources to get a vinyl, and what better way to start with the greatest rap album of all time. But yeah, man, stay tuned. We're definitely going to add to the collection. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.